You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. Each week, you'll hear from remarkable guests who have overcome challenges and obstacles to succeed in the face of adversity. By listening to their stories, you'll get practical tips, tools, and resources you can implement today to bust through your own internalized prisons of worry and doubt. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hi there, this is Sarah, and thanks so much for downloading this episode of the No Labels, No Limits podcast, a podcast all about shedding limiting labels and beliefs so we can lead fulfilling, meaningful, and purposeful lives. And I believe without a doubt that we are each capable of more than we imagine. And sometimes life just delivers up those opportunities for us in ways that we couldn't have imagined. And we're going to learn more about that on today's podcast episode when we're joined by our guest, Matthew Gessler. So let me tell you a little bit about Matt, and I'm going to call you Matt. Okay, Matt? Is that good?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Perfect, because you just seem like in our conversations, you're a Matt guy. So,
and listen, if we grew up together in Brooklyn, New York, you would have called me Maddie.
I like Maddie. I like it. Okay. Not for nothing. Okay. Sorry. Different story.
No, it's all good.
Okay. So Matt is a user experience leader. He has over 20 years experience practicing executive level UX strategy, design, and management. And he's spoken at multiple conferences. And he also publishes UX, user experience articles to his company's Insight blogs. But here's something that I thought was really interesting about Matt. Right after finishing his studies at Binghamton University School of Management, his first job was working as a developer. You know, and they say timing is everything. Well, his entry into development work was right at the beginning of the .com bust. Welcome to your professional career, Matt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then the company he was employed by went out of business. So new career, here you go, no job. But the good news for Matt was, since he hated development, which he learned quickly on, his director at the time also knew that, and she suggested he try becoming a producer and recommended him for a job at Urban Box Office. And that was his entry into wireframing and design as a producer for Kirschenbaum Bond Senecal. And I'm going to ask Matt to tell us a little bit about the difference of those labels, because they are different. And I think sometimes those of us, I'm raising my hand here, who look at that kind of work from the outside in, lump it all together, and it's not the same. But because of his impressive performance, it opened up more opportunities for him. And after that, he became vice president for Interaction Engineering Center of Excellence, long word, Interaction Engineering COE in the future for Bank of America. And he ran collaboration development services that involved providing customized development solutions for all lines of business within the bank and the Interaction Engineering Center of Excellence itself. So his entire career focused mainly on the user experience consultancy until he became principal user experience architect for Gannett USA Today Network. You know, for only being in business a few short years, in retrospect, Matt, you have covered a lot of ground. And currently, Matt is the director of UX UI at Radiant Digital, and we're going to talk to him a little bit more about that. But he oversees user research activities and works with Fortune 50 clients to define their project vision. And if that wasn't enough, he holds licenses for certified Safe 5 product owner, manager, and practitioner, managing projects, Six Sigma and Six Sigma Green Belt, which basically means when it comes to project management, project organization, Matt's your guy. Because that allows him to present this, you know, what could be really a complex model to those of us on the outside. It allows him to present and work with us in ways that also emphasize business agility, focusing on customer centricity, and then expanding the aspect of a portfolio management for a company. In his spare time, does he have spare time? In his spare time, Matt produces music. So with all that, Matt, formal welcome to the No Labels, No Limits podcast.
Sarah, thank you so much for having me. I am tickled pink.
Well, you know, we've been a long time in getting this interview going, from setting it up to having to move it to, you know, all kinds of stuff. And then COVID hits. I mean, it's just crazy.
But the funny thing is, right, now with COVID, all the days are blending together.
They are.
And it might have been like 6 months, but it feels like 2 days. Am I the only one who feels that way?
I don't think you are the only one. I mean, there's a time warp thing going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, there is. People go, well, wasn't that years ago? I'm thinking, no, we know that was there. It just gets compressed.
I literally, to that point, I had a meeting last week. It was literally a week ago today. And we had a follow-up meeting today. And somebody on the call says, guys, this has been open for about, 3 months. And I was like, we literally only met last week. And he said, oh my God, I am so sorry. And I was like, listen, we're all there. Don't worry about it.
We are. And I've become really intentional about putting dates on things. Like, so same to that point, I had a meeting yesterday with these folks who were planning a collaborative design, on a system that they all work. It's not a computer system, but it's like, how are we going to work together type of system, cross systems, all this. So there's the business culture, all that kind of thing. And not everybody could be there. So I said, I will follow up. But I mean, I'm so specific now. It's like, here, you're going to get 3 emails. The first one is this, it's short. Second one is this. The third one is this. And I said, this is the last you're going to hear from me on this. But they all had yesterday's meeting date in them. So people go, what's this for? Right.
Exactly.
Because it does. Exactly. It just all runs together.
Exactly.
Yep. So, but I wanted to ask you a question specifically, is how we can joke about like the changed environment, but how are you doing, with changing work during COVID? And, we're coming up on a year on it now.
I know. And it is the most bizarre year of, my 43 years of existence, right? So I am your typical extrovert. I love going to the office, interacting with my team, being able to pull the younger ones into a conference room, get on the whiteboard, and on top of that, being part of a consulting company. Before the pandemic, I was on a plane once a week, and literally the last time I flew was probably the first week of March of 2020. And I'm climbing the walls, to be quite honest with you. But, I don't want to be selfish, right? Like, I know it is for the greater good to stay home, stay separated, not selfishly travel, things like that. So I'm hopeful now that, I think, was it yesterday, Fauci announced that, come April, anybody who really wants to get a vaccine will get one. I will be there with my sleeve rolled up, ready to go.
Yeah, there's still waiting lines here, but yes, and I think there's a lot of hope for that to be more widespread and for people to feel safer. And there's the psychological aspect of it too. It's hard we are relationship-based people. And I'm an introvert, so I'm totally cool working remote, but there is nothing better for me than being on site with a client and getting to do in the moment play, like going, okay, we're going to put these papers up. We can do this like this quickly, versus thinking, how do I convert an in-person event, a 10-minute activity, into something online that feels as connected?
Well, you know what? There's something to be said about the third dimension, right? That physical aspects, right?
Yes.
Like, the funny thing was, and when online dating first became a thing, I was like, let me try this, before I got married. And
that's good.
but it was one of these things where I tried it, and I meet someone and be like, oh, I'm excited about it. And then you meet in physical, and there was no chemistry, no spark, right? And it's one of those things where there's something to be said about that third dimension, right? And I think that applies to our business relationships as well.
Yeah, it's true. I think so too. And it takes more time. You can build those trusting relationships remotely, but it takes more time, and it takes a different skill set.
Absolutely.
It does, or an added skill set.
Yeah. I'd say we're at Radiant Digital, we're really lucky that we've actually had a very decentralized company in terms of, I've always had a lot of people working remotely, other states, other areas. So we had a very good virtual model to begin with. So our transition into the pandemic wasn't as rough as some other companies.
Yeah, especially folks who work one-on-one with people or frontline workers and all of that.
Exactly.
So let me back up a little bit and talk about the one thing that I do ask all of our guests, and that is there something that you do every day that kind of keeps you focused on what your big goals are?
Unfortunately, I'm a workaholic, and I found that this pandemic has actually made me work longer hours, because in my mind, I've said, well, if I'm not commuting for 35, 40 minutes each way a day, right, I can get up at the same time, get down to my office, log on, engage. And, I haven't yet, I'm not suffering burnout. It's more I'm climbing the walls looking for that, human interaction.
Yeah. Well, good. So you're keeping a schedule.
Yes, I think that's the most important part. Exactly.
Yeah, I find that for me too. It's like, okay, I just need some parameters, and then I can change them if I need to or want to. But okay, so let's talk about, I threw out a lot of acronyms and information in your introduction. So tell our listeners, when we talk about user experience, what the heck is that? And what is a user experience leader? What do you do?
So user experience, whether people realize it or not, it's in every aspect of your life. Whether you're picking up your remote control for your television and seeing how the buttons are laid out and configured, to the guide that might be on your cable and how that's laid out and configured, to your microwave, to have the buttons and laid out. It's everything that a person interacts with a product. And it was the interesting thing, I think UX was really pioneered in terms of the military complex. Like, it really came into vogue, I would probably say, in the 40s or 50s, in terms of layouts, in terms of tanks and the machinery to make it easier for people to operate. So now we think about it in terms of like everything from your iPhone to, websites, where that ease of use, right? Can we pick up an item and start using it immediately without reading a manual or learning about it or Googling it, whatever it might be? So what I tell people is, my job is to make people's lives easier.
So, and that was a big switch when you got to be doing that work from doing code.
Yes. Kind of like the UX person is the architect who draws up the blueprints for the house, where, the developer is the one with the hammer and nails, actually putting the frames together, putting the plumbing in, etc.
So how has your work, and I'm thinking about this not just for like the big companies that you work with, or that people might say, oh, that's great for those big firms or the military, whatever, but how does thinking with a UX lens help us, all of us, do better in our work and in our experiences with other people, whether we're running small organizations or businesses? How does that mindset help us?
Well, the great thing about UX, in particular, there's a concept called design thinking, where one of the main aspects is empathize, right? And there's really two types of empathy, where the first one is emotional empathy. So say, Sarah, you had lost your book bag and it made you really, really sad. And, I see you and I get sad because you're sad. That's emotional empathy. But then there's cognitive empathy, where I want to know, I see that you're sad. I want to figure out why you're sad. And I ask you, hey, Sarah, what's wrong? What's bothering you? Tell me, fill me in. And with UX, we practice empathy to understand what our users are feeling, what they want, what they need, and utilize that information to then define a problem, and then utilize that information to formulate a solution.
So then when we think about that lens, how does that kind of apply in workforce transformation as it relates to business? So I'm thinking about, we've been through a lot of workforce transformation in a compressed time, right?
Exactly. I mean, so it's, I'll give you a great example. So right now at Radiant, one of my biggest clients is Verizon, and we're doing enterprise applications for them. So meaning they're the tools their employees that help keep the cellular systems up, your wireline systems up, your FiOS going, et cetera. And typically what used to happen was, IT might design an application, say, hey, I think this is ready, throw it over the fence to the users. They would use it and then maybe give their feedback. What we do is step in and sit with the users, sit over their shoulders, watch them work, understand what are their goals, what are they trying to accomplish today, what are the systems they use, how do they use them, what are those pain points, what are the pleasure points, and distill information from that so that we are getting a more complete picture before we're even writing a single line of code, right? So there's a old rule of thumb that for every dollar that you spend in upfront usability work, you're saving a minimum of $100 in downstream development. And depending on the complexity of the project, that number can even balloon to $1,000. So that empathy, can work on so many different levels, right? Because we can all assume, I've talked to product owners, oh, I know my users, this is what they want, but it's what he thinks they want. It's not in actuality.
So when you say you look over their shoulders, see, you're in IT, so you actually could be remotely looking over their shoulders and looking at data usage, right? But then are there less technical ways? Because the value of doing that, and I'm thinking about even the organizations I work with that are doing direct services, right? And they're having to adapt. But oftentimes they're adapting based on what they think needs to happen, not necessarily what the people are telling them or even what's coming back, right? Because there's not the information. So how could someone who doesn't have the technical, I don't want to use language that sounds terrible, because it's kind of like that once you're working on systems or computer systems, you've got a lot of data points to pull. But when you're working with people who you may not have those interactions with, may have fewer data points, right?
Well, it's breaking that quantitative information that you're referencing, right? So like if we're talking about a website or an application, what are that hard, cold data, right? Like where are people clicking? Where are they dropping off, right? What are the actions they're taking? But you need to marry that with the qualitative, right? That person-to-person interview, right? Like understanding their mindset, really like what their frustration points are. What are their emotional bonds to a system, right? Because in some of these organizations, and especially say at Verizon, some of these applications that we're revamping, people have used for literally 20 years. there's an emotional bond there, right? Like this is I've worked with the company for 20 years. This is the application I've used for 20 years. I know it in and out. I can do it in my sleep. So how do we convince them to say, look, we need to move on, right? And it's like, do you still use a VCR? No, you watch Netflix now, right? So we got to let go. We have to, heed to progress.
Yeah, and I'm curious how much the pandemic is going to push some of those things that people have said for a while. They know we need to get there, and then all of a sudden it's like you have no choice. You have to be there now, right? Because that's how we work. So, that is curious to me, because as you're saying that, we have this one company that I've been with since like '83. My husband goes, I don't know why you stay with them. It's emotional, right? I know anytime I need anything, I make one phone call and I get it. And he goes, but it's more expensive. I says, I make one phone call and they solve the problem for me. I don't have to make 10. I don't have to follow up. So I'm thinking, yeah, it's a little more, but not on the pain point of having to recreate all those relationships again. So, but talk about a little bit when you think about your first job, and then what kind of notable achievements from that led you to become vice president, and then now at your current level, because those are big jumps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of my earlier positions, my career at Kirschenbaum, I was a producer, which really was at the time, UX wasn't that big of a field. A lot of these terms weren't coined, right? I think if I had that same position now, I would have been called a user experience designer. I did a very big project for Edward Jones, the financial services company, where we revamped their website. And the approach I took was meeting with a lot of Edward Jones advisors, and the way they spoke was they made investing simple. I think that might even still be their tagline. And I remember I met with all these advisors, and one of them said, hey, think of the market as someone with a yo-yo walking up a flight of stairs. The yo-yo is that daily fluctuations in the market. The person is the overall movement of the market. And that stuck with me. And so when I approached redoing their website, I said, let's put it in terms that people can understand. So rather than say, categorize things by financial product, like, retirement, and here's a 401k IRA. Let's do things by age, life event, right? So I just had a baby. What should I do, right? Because that makes investing simple. And we wound up winning a web marketing award, which then caught the attention of a recruiter at Bank of America who directly reached out to me. And that kind of launched my career, to get into Bank of America. I think when I started there, it was an AVP. And, within a year as a VP, a year after that, I was running a team, and my career just kept moving on and on. And I'll say, the great thing about user experience and being in financial services, they're one of the first ones who actually saw the value in it, right? Because if I could help a trader make a better decision, shave a second off that decision, that helps them make money. And, it gave me invaluable experience and really launched my career.
That's so interesting to me, because the part for me that you said that really captured my ear was taking that metaphor of someone with a yo-yo going up the stairs, because a regular person, right? I can picture that in my head, the life events, right? It's like, okay, now I can relate. Financial products, snoozeville,
Yeah, exactly.
It could be, but yet it's important. But you can make it seem so complex, financial products, instead of saying, just where are you in your life? What's important here? Where will you be? What are your goals? Those kinds of things. And so it does make sense that an organization or a company that could see an immediate ROI on doing that work would be a big proponent of the work. What have you seen come, though? I mean, that was back in the beginning when they were one of the earlier adopters. So have you seen this approach kind of be more widespread? I know you talked about Six Sigma and the product management and all of that, which has become more commonplace. I don't know how common it is, but it's more commonplace as approaches go. What have you seen?
Well, I would say, I owe probably most of my career to companies like Apple, right? Like who put, user experience, or I don't even take it a step back in terms of customer experience to the forefront, right? Like I think recently I saw an article online why no one throws away their iPhone box. And I was like, wait, I think I have all my iPhone boxes, even with my old iPhones in them. And part of that is because they're pretty, they feel good, right? It's that, again, we talk about emotional connection, right? And everything is just seamless, from like the way you open it to the way you turn it on, you set it up, right? They made user experience in the spotlight, right? And everybody wants to emulate that, right? Because if you think about Apple and the how the brand, people are so loyal to the brand, right?
Yeah.
And it's through that simplicity of experience. And it got noticed. And now everyone wants to do that, so hats off to them. I have a career because of it.
But I also think it throws the challenge to the rest of us to think about all the processes we do that could be complex, and we've just accepted them because that's how we've done them, rather than stepping back and saying, is this aspect necessary? Does it add something, or could we toss it, right?
No, it's funny. I now at Radiant, I have within my practice, I have over 30 people, and a lot of junior designers, junior UI developers. And so my team, I always challenge them to take a different perspective on problems. And one of the stories I tell them going back to Apple was when the first iPod was created. They brought it to Steve Jobs and they said, hey, we're done. Isn't this great? And it had a power button on it. The first question he asked them was, why does it need a power button? That's think about that. The requirement was we need to turn it on and off. Somebody said, all right, we need to put a power button on it. But that's not how you're going to use a music player. The first thing you're going to do is want to hit the play button. Why can't that be the power button? So that's what I challenge my team to bring, that critical thinking, right? Can we lower that cognitive load? Can we take a different perspective on a problem to say, if it's 10 screens, can we do it in 5? Can we do it in 2? Why not?
Interesting, because when you say the cognitive load, I think as people right now, we're really swimming in a cognitive overload.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But at the same time, right, when this started, I could say to you, in these trying times.
No, they're just our times now.
But now, exactly. That's the point. It's just our times.
Yeah.
And we learn, we adapt, and you know what? We're going to get past this. But are we going to be in a position to grow and succeed when we're back to quote unquote normal?
Yeah, and I think we're probably, I'm an optimist, honestly. And I think that when people say, well, when things get back to normal, and if you really look, things were never predictable. They were more stable, perhaps, right? But the normal always changes.
Yeah,
it always changes. But we just have this thing of saying, oh, tomorrow will be like today, like the next day. And it always changes. We just didn't have these radical changes. So I think we will get back to some kind of balance. I don't know what that will look like. But I think there's
well,
an
no
opportunity.
one does. That's
No,
the great
right.
thing, you know, and that's what can be exciting.
Exactly. And I think there's going to be some great innovation that's come. I mean, look at just, I was telling my husband too, I says, look at the companies. And because we just watched an ad for, this is a, unpaid ad for Ryder trucks. I'm thinking, you know what? You never saw ads for Ryder, but now with logistics and things having to be shipped, of course, right? They're big guys now. People need them. And so, but those are opportunities they may not have seen coming. But I want to get back to you and your work. And, you talked about your team. Do you think it takes some different kind of leadership today in the work that you do than when you first started doing your work? Or is it pretty much the same, Matt?
From like the beginning of my career versus now?
Yeah. I would say pick the key high points, after your first business went out of business.
Yeah. But I'd say, I think a good leader, whether it was in the year 2000 versus the year 2021, those qualities I think are somewhat the same, right? Like, that first job that I had, my director, she was phenomenal. Like, and she was able to see, my talents, what I wanted, and gave me a recommendation when we went out of business, with a college friend of hers who worked at another company, to say, interview this kid, give him a chance. And that launched my career, right? It's about having that empathy, being able to spot people's strengths, their weaknesses. How can we build them up? I often say, I'm successful when my team's successful, right? Like, I don't need the spotlight. When the people under me shine, they win awards, they get congrats from our clients, that's when I'm satisfied. So I think that really is the most important part, right? Like, yeah, the tools, the technology, it might change, right? But
it's the people.
It's the qualities and the people that really matter.
Yep. Well, and boy, and a good team can accomplish some amazing things when their backs are against the wall and when things are going great.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got 'em. So has there been something that you needed to sacrifice for your roles at Radiant?
I'd say the only sacrifice is time. And that hasn't even been that bad this year. Like I mentioned, I used to travel a lot, right? Because I have, clients all around the country. And again, we talked about that third dimension, right? Being able to, go there, talk to somebody, see their body language, right? If there was a problem with the project, I'm like, all right, I'll get on a plane, I'll head over there, and you can do that over a video call, but it's not the same as being person to person, because I'm like, hey, let me take you out to dinner. Let's talk this over. Really, what's really going on, right? And making it a more personal experience, right? And so in terms of like a sacrifice, yeah, maybe I'm sacrificing time away from my loved ones, right? But at the same time, I enjoy that kind of stuff. So I don't know if I could call it a sacrifice necessarily.
It's maybe a trade-off is a better word for it.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
So, you are a keynote speaker. Did that go away this past year, or did you go remote for it?
Well, I've focused a lot on doing webinars this year. So last year, I should say, 2020, where I did about, 4 virtual events. Not the same. I'm kind of, like I mentioned earlier, I'm an extrovert. I enjoy being up on the stage, and seeing the crowd there and talking to everyone. Where a virtual crowd, even if I see there's, 100 people, like in the Zoom meetings, not the same adrenaline rush, so to speak. But, again, we have to adapt. We have to do our part. And I'll be looking forward to, maybe fingers crossed, this fall, getting back out on that stage.
So do you have special topics, though, that you like to speak on when you do speak? When you do get back out there and you get to be in person? What are your favorite topics to talk on?
Well, always user experience, right? But really on how it relates to maybe specific problems. Like last year, a big topic for me was around digital transformation and how UX can be a driver for that. I think this year I want to focus more on workshops and getting people engaged and interactively, because again, we're missing that person-to-person connection. So I'm still kicking around some ideas. I'll let you know if, once I land on one, but doing some virtual workshops where it can help bring UX community members together.
So I have questions about that.
Sure.
So when you say bringing UX community members together, are they the clients or the other people like you bringing them together to help people?
I think, I'm a big advocate of being inclusive. And okay. I think UX is one of those things, you don't have to be a UX professional to want to be involved and care about it, right? So especially when I go into a client organization, whether it's IT, product, marketing, doesn't matter. Like, we all need a seat at the table, right? It's beholden on all of us, because UX isn't a checklist item to say, all right, I've done the user experience, right? It's a constant interaction of how a user uses a product. And that is beholden upon our BAs, our development, our testers. It doesn't matter, right? They all need that seat at the table. So it's really opening it up to everyone, giving exposure to the field and understanding that it takes a village.
Okay. Well, and does that same concept apply? You're talking about a product, but does that apply to a service?
Absolutely. That's service design. So let's say there are two coffee shops across the street from each other.
My favorite beverage.
Yeah, they sell the same. They sell the same exact coffee.
Okay.
For the same exact price. Service design is going to be the driver to which one you actually go to. Right? The one that says, "Hey, Sarah," when you come in and gets your drink going right away, could differentiate from the one across the street.
Yep.
So it's all inclusive.
Okay. It's helpful for me, because when people ask, like, well, and I'm going to ask you this question instead of just wondering, but if people say, well, how do I know if I should reach out to Matt, and or his team? Who are your people? Who do you typically work with?
Really, anyone who has a software application problem to solve, because it doesn't matter if you're a Fortune 50 company or even like Joe's Pizza Shop, right? They could need a website that's designed to make it more intuitive, to increase their orders, to reduce their cycle time in terms of like completing their orders. It doesn't matter, right? It's about that understanding of process and helping people.
Okay. So someone could reach out to you or your team and at least pose what their problem is, and you guys could walk them through and see if there's a fit for it.
Absolutely.
So then with that, what is the best way for people to stay connected to you, Matt?
Well, definitely feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I'd be happy, to accept any invitations, or feel free to follow me. But you can also check out radiant.digital and check out our insights, where you can see a lot of the webinars I do and articles that I've written.
So there's good resources there that can help people out already.
Absolutely. Plenty of articles and case studies about our digital transformation experience. But the webinars, I think, are probably the most engaging. Okay.
Good heads up. I'm going to make a left turn on you here as we wrap this up. What is your favorite thing about doing your music, and what kind of music do you do? since you said that's what you do in your spare time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I appreciate you asking that, because it is my artistic outlet that, allows me to kind of step away from, the stress of the workday. I have a very eclectic taste in music. I was a DJ when I was younger, in high school and college, and even a little bit after that. I got into kind of electronic music production in my early 20s. I do a lot of, hip hop and house music. And it's really something that I just enjoy for me. And I can make a musical masterpiece, and I'll be the only one to hear it, and I'm happy with that.
We all need our creativity.
Yes.
It's a balance piece.
Absolutely.
Yep. Matt, I just want to thank you so much for being a guest on the No Labels, No Limits podcast. And folks, I really encourage you to check Matt out on LinkedIn, look at Radiant rather, and also ask questions, because there is a thinking behind what Matt does that can help all of us improve how we interact with the world through our businesses and our digital platforms. Let me just say it that much, whether it's software or websites. So Matt, again, thanks so much. And
all right, thank you for having me. This was super fun. I really enjoyed it.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.